So Raymond is the manager of the British and Irish team in the Family Search Library. He's been presenting and he's been working here for about 20 some years, I believe, Raymond. But otherwise, he's a great guy. I don't have a script for the introduction, so that's what I'll tell you. And we'll now turn the time over to Raymond.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Well, welcome to Getting Started with British Army Records. This topic is near and dear to my heart because so many of my Nesbitt ancestors were part of the British Army. And so I'm excited to be able to present and help you find your ancestors' records and those who fought with the British. Our objectives today, one is to learn what British Army records are available. And then two, learn the websites for searching these records. And then the third objective is for you to use what you learned today after the presentation to go in and search one of these sites for your British Army ancestor. And then just to remember, you don't need to go and record everything or write down everything. The handout includes all of the essential information that you need for knowing what records are available and how to find and access those records. All right, so one question that we get is, why search British Army records? What will British Army records tell us? You may find your ancestor's birth date, birthplace, place of residence, death date, death place, military history, where they served, their physical description. You may also find their occupation and possibly names of parents and spouse, children, relatives, pension granted, medals earned, and their medical history. So it doesn't mean that you will find all of that for your ancestor, but you may find bits and pieces of this on your British Army ancestor. A lot of the times you will find their age, you will find their occupation, and where they were born. And so even that alone can give you some great key information for finding your ancestor. So when we talk about the British Army, that includes all of England and Wales, Scotland, and Ireland before 1922. So some people might say, well, my ancestor was Irish. Didn't they fight in the Irish Army? No, that was the British Army. Or my ancestors were Scottish. Was there a Scottish Army? And no, that was the British Army. So the British Army includes all of the British Isles. The first mustered army was in 1660, and that's when they started keeping military records. So under Queen Victoria, the British Army expanded to include Australia, New Zealand, India, Canada, South Africa, and other parts of Africa. So you will find people from these areas in the British Army records online. So when searching for your British Army records, it's important to ask these questions. Do you know the birth county of your ancestor? So again, a lot of times people don't, and so they want to find the military record to find that. But it is helpful if your ancestor has a common name. If they're a John Brown, knowing the birth county will help you know that you've got the right John Brown. Do you know your ancestor's regiment? Again, a lot of times people don't. Once you find the regiment, it will open up the doors to additional military records. Do you know when your ancestor served? Did they serve in the Crimean War? For me, I always heard that my fourth great grandfather fought in the Battle of New Orleans. And so knowing that, it gave me a specific time period when I could start searching. And then, do you know any clues, like was your ancestor a foot soldier? Were they in the cavalry, artillery? Knowing if they were, did they operate a gun, were they a cannon, or did they ride a horse? That can lead you to specific records. And then, was your ancestor an officer? Officer records are more detailed. They give great information about spouse and children and family information. So again, it's not critical that you know this, but it will help you, and it'll be easier to find your ancestors if you know some of these specifics. Was my ancestor an officer? Here's a list of different commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers. And so if you see your ancestor was one of these, then the likelihood of them having additional or more detailed records would be likely. All right, so where can you find some clues to whether or not your ancestor served in the military, or did they have any medals or anything like that? You can find those in family records. You might find those in cemetery records. Obituaries might say that your ancestor was a soldier, or they fought in this regiment or in this war. Monumental inscriptions, so on the actual tombstone inscriptions themselves, may give you some specific clues. Any birth, marriage, or death certificates could also say that his occupation was a soldier, or he fought in this battle. If any medals were passed down, old letters and diaries, census records, parish registers, pension certificates, and then family tradition in the battle of or stationed at. A lot of these are clues that you can find in your family history that can lead you to specific details about your ancestor. So this is Henry W. Nesbitt. He is my second great grandfather. And not too long ago, my aunt, she knew that I love family history, and she had these books, and she said, would you be interested in having these histories and these books? And of course I was, and I was surprised to find this history of my second great grandfather. And he gives details about his life and about his family and his ancestors that I had never heard before. And in there he says, my grandfather, so I knew my fourth great grandfather fought in the Battle of New Orleans, and that he died. And that's the only thing I knew. But in this journal, he says, my grandfather, Joseph Nesbitt, was in the British service, and tradition says that he was a paymaster at the Battle of New Orleans early in the past century, meeting death at New Orleans while crossing a plank from the mainland to the war vessel. So he's talking about his grandfather, and he gives more specific details. We find out that he was a paymaster. So first, again, it shows that he was in the British Army. He was a paymaster, which I didn't know. And the Battle of New Orleans I did. And I didn't realize that he had died while crossing a plank from the mainland to the war vessel. He then goes on to say, so his grandfather's brother John was in the military service of his country, was straight as an arrow, approaching 6 feet in height, dying at quite a ripe old age. His son William was a recruiting sergeant, Napoleon style, which I thought was interesting, and he was stationed at Bolton, Lancashire, England. So again, I discovered that not only was my fourth great grandfather, but his brother John, which I didn't know, was also in the military service. His son William also fought in the British Army and was a recruiting sergeant, and he was stationed at Bolton, Lancashire. So again, from the family books that my aunt gave me, it's given me more clues into how I can find his service record. And then he says, but strangely enough, when he had to furnish the ribbons worn by recruits then, and for many years afterwards, he brought these at the shop of a young and demure Quaker maiden who fell in love with a dashing sergeant and then seduced him from military life to the hearts. So again, it tells me he's a sergeant, hearts of trade and peace, of which he was quite successful, laying close to the end of the 18th century. So he falls in love with a Quaker maiden, they get married, and he leaves his sergeant military life behind. And then this was really cool for me, because I did not know that his father, who was my third great grandfather, was also in the military. He says, my father was also a petty officer in the army who died in local militia. So he gives me a clue that his father was a petty officer in the army, and that also he was in the local militia. So now I can search militia records to try to find my third great grandfather. And he dies while my second great grandfather was but 9 years old at his father's death. So again, speak to relatives who may have had these things passed down. I didn't realize that my grandfather had them, and he passed them down to my aunt, who then gave them to me. And this has kind of been a treasure to find and give me more insights into my British Army heritage. So now we're going to talk about different strategies for searching British Army records. We're going to go through 9 different strategies and records that you can use to find your own British Army ancestor. So the first one is the British Army service records. This is a big database, and they're available on Family Search as well as Find My Past. And there's over 8 million records in there. And so it's a great place to start. Then we can also search the British Army Forces and Overseas Birth, Marriages, and Deaths. This is also a large database of over 8 million people. And it is also available on FamilySearch.org and Find My Past. And again, that information is all in your handout. The UK campaign medals, which are on Ancestry.com. And then the UK British muster books and pay lists. So this is also an Ancestry, and there's about 5 years worth of records that are on Ancestry. But it still has over about 500,000 people in the database. The British East India records. So if your ancestor had anything to do with the British East India Company, or if they lived over in India or was part of the military service there. And then FamilySearch.org has a lot of free digital records available online. There's some fantastic databases for if your ancestor fought during World War I and World War II. A lot of great records are available online. The National Archives also has free digital microfilm online that you can get access to. And finally, when you have exhausted all of your resources online, the majority of records are still only available at the National Archives in England. And we'll kind of discuss that a little bit more in depth. But most of the stuff that we talked about today, most of the websites are going to be on these 4 sites: Family Search, Find My Past, Ancestry.com, and the National Archives website. These are kind of your 4 big heavy hitters. And we'll discuss a few other ones like Fold3, which is becoming a great resource for military ancestors. That one actually, I had always associated it with US military, but for British military records, it's also becoming a great resource. All right, so first off, the British Army service records that you can search on Family Search or on Find My Past. And I'm going to show you the steps. This is also in your handout. But on all of these sites, I always look for the keyword search. And so I find search, and then on Family Search, I'll click on records. And under Find a Collection, I can type in United Kingdom. And as I type in United Kingdom, it will bring up a lot of these military records, of which are the Chelsea Pensioners Service records. Okay, and then on Find My Past, same thing. I look for the word search, and then I can click the world. And again, these instructions are in your handout. And then all I have to type in is British military or British Armed Forces, and the keywords will show up there. So the service records are a conglomeration of many different records. So these include the records from the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, and they were the ones that issued the pensions. So from 1760 to 1913, those records are part of the British service records. The record of pension payments from 1842 to 1883. The Royal Hospital Chelsea admission books and registration papers from 1702 to 1933. Soldiers discharged from the Army between 1787 and 1813. And soldiers awarded deferred pensions from 1838 to 1896. So no, I don't expect you to remember all of that. I just wanted you to be aware that the British Army service records includes many. It's not just one type of service record. It's a conglomeration of different records that have been put together. All right, so these service records, though, are fantastic. And again, there's over 8 million records in this database that you can search on Family Search or Find My Past. And this is some of the information that you may find for your ancestor while searching these records. The name of the soldier, their birth year, their birth town, parish, and county, which sometimes is a stumbling block because people want to know specifically where in England they were, or Ireland or Scotland they were from. Their residence or their address, their occupation, their marital status, age at attestation, their service number, rank, regiment. So if you can find your ancestor indexed in these service records, it would automatically give you the regiment, and then you can go in using that regiment and find additional records. Their unit, battalion, their physical description, religious denomination, any distinguishing marks, their medical examination, statement of services. So a lot of times it will tell you where they served, their attestation day, attestation corps, possible death date, military history. This particular one served in Malta, Cyprus, Gibraltar. So he was going all over. On this particular one as well, it gives the name and address of his next of kin. So in this record, it names his father, and it names his brother Joseph. So his father Joseph, his brother Joseph, where the family's from, and then it names his 3 sisters, Hannah, Elizabeth, and Emily. So a lot of great key family information that was contained in this soldier's service record. It may name possible other relatives, if the soldier received any medals, decorations, had any wounds, to whom he married, if he was married. So this one is blank, so this soldier was not married. His date of discharge, and then any pension application or outcomes. So again, a lot of fantastic records and information that you can get from the service records. So it's one of the first places that I would start because they're accessible, they're online, and they're indexed, and they give a lot of great information if you can find your ancestor. So the second database is the British Armed Forces and Overseas that are available at Family Search and at Find My Past. These are also indexed. So again, I go to search, I go to records, I follow the same steps. Under Find a Collection, I type in United Kingdom, and there I have the British Armed Forces from 1761. And then on Find My Past, I go to search, all record sets, and I just type in British Armed Forces, and there are the databases that are included that you can search. So these databases include births and baptisms. So these are the birth and baptisms of soldiers, and if they had children, if they were married while they were a soldier and their children were baptized, then they would be included in these British Armed Forces database overseas. If they got married while as a soldier, if they died or were buried or had family members living with them, then they would also be included in those deaths and burial records. Their medical records, that is especially for those who fought in World War I. And then wills from 1850 to 1986, you may find that. Now, what we have online on Family Search and what Find My Past has are the indexes. To get the original records, you would still need to order them from the General Register's office on that website. And using that website, you can also go in and when you order it, they can send it to your email. So this is an example. This is on Find My Past. This is an index. This is of an Eleanor Nesbitt. And here she was born. So her father was a soldier. She was born in 1809 in Dublin, Ireland. And so she was included in this database. And then up here it says view original record. That's to view the original index. But then using this information, so over to the right, it says volume, page number, line number. I would use that to order the original birth certificate or the birth record. This is an Abraham James Nesbitt from 1818, 1864. This is his marriage. And here it says that he was married in Corfu in Greece, which I thought was pretty cool. And then I could go to the information on the right and order that record. And then finally, this is an index to George Thompson Nesbitt, who was buried in 1916 during World War I. And it gives me that information. So in this one tricky thing is you are going to need to make sure that you have the right ancestor because some of the indexes don't give as much information. And this is an example of a medical record. So this was in 1915 during World War I. Here it just says F. Nesbitt, so it doesn't give the full first name. But I do have a birth year in 1894 and that he was a private. And it does give me his regiment, his battalion number, service number, his rank. And then so this is the website, the General Register's office, which is included in your handout where you would go and order those original certificates. The third database is the UK campaign medals from 1793 to 1949. This has over 500,000 records of, actually I think it's more than that, of I think it's like 3 million records for those who may have earned a medal. But on Ancestry.com, it's the same thing. I look for that keyword search. So same thing with Find My Past, Family Search, I look for search. This time I go to the card catalog and I type in UK campaign medals. And I have given you in your handout the keywords to search for. And then here, yeah, it's 2.3 million records of those who earned a medal. And it doesn't matter where they were. If they fought in Africa, Asia, Middle East, Oceania, they earned a medal, they would be in this database. So this database is not going to give you names of parents or where they're from or their birth, but it will give you their regiment name. And then with that name and number, you can find additional records. It will give you the soldier's rank, the type of medal earned, the service place, and the service date. And so because they're accessible, they're indexed, it still would be a great database to go in and search, especially because you get that name of the regiment. This is a Joseph Nesbitt, so it gives me the service date of 1877 to 1879. It was in South Africa, and I now have the regiment, the Cape Mounted Riflemen. So he earned a medal in South Africa, and so he's included in the database, and now it gives the name of the regiment. Same thing with the Samuel Nesbitt, it gives me the specifics of the 89 Regiment, and this was in Crimea during the Crimean War. So again, it helps me find additional databases and records. All right, the fourth database is the UK Muster Books and Pay List from 1812 to 1817. Now, even though it's only a 5-year span, it still is a good database to serve, especially if your ancestor served in the early 1800s, because there's over 400,000 names in these muster pay books. Most of the muster books and pay lists are only available at the National Archives in England. So it's kind of cool that we have some of them available on ancestry.com. So same thing, I go to search, card catalog, in the keyword search, I type in the UK muster books, and then I can click that database, and you can see that it's almost 500,000. Again, these are similar to the medals, where you're going to get the soldier's name, their regiment, their rank, their start date, end date, where they were stationed, and their pay. So not a whole lot, but again, you get that regiment and where they were stationed. So this is an example of this is a Thomas Nesbitt. Again, it shows me the start of the muster, the end of the muster, and that key piece of information is his regiment, which is the 2nd Lifeguards. And then I can use that regiment to find the history of the regiment and to find specifically where he was. So again, they're not as detailed as the service records or as the armed forces birth, marriages, and deaths overseas, but both the medals and the muster books still give you a key piece of information with that regiment. The 5th one is to search for soldiers from the East India Company. And we have these are on Family Search, on Find My Past, on Ancestry.com. There's another one called Phoebus.org that also has these records. But again, I go to search records and type in United Kingdom like I do for the other ones, and then I can look for the India office records. Same thing with Find My Past. I go to search all record sets, and I type in British India, and I have the records pertaining to the East India Company. So the East India Company existed from 1600 to 1874, almost 274 years, and they have records that were kept. It at one time was the largest corporation in the world, and they were a trading company. So they sold, they traded things like silk, cotton, spices, sugar, salt, and much, much more. They'd go over into India, and then they'd go all over the world, and they would sell and trade. What was interesting with the East India Company is that they included its own armed forces, and it was significantly large. It's estimated that they had over 260,000 soldiers that were stationed in 3 different presidencies. You can see the map here. Bombay was to the west, which also included some of modern-day Pakistan. You had Bengal to the east, which also included other countries as well, here in the red. And then Madras was in the south, that you can kind of see in the purple. And so if your ancestor was there as part of the East India Company, was a soldier stationed there, there are some great records that are freely searchable and free online. So these might include births and baptism records, marriages, deaths and burials, their pension records, their wills, and directories. In the births, you're going to get the name of the child, their gender, the baptismal date of the child, their birth date of the child, names of parents, where they were living, and the occupation of the father, which a lot of times tells you specifically what the father did in the military. Marriages, you get the date of marriage, the names of the bride and groom, their ages and marital status. So that's important because a lot of times it will tell you if they were a widow or if they'd been married previously, the rank, the profession, where they were living at the time of the marriage. This is the key piece of genealogical information you get is the name of the father for the bride and the name of the father for the groom. Whether they were married by banns or license. If they were married by license, then it would include additional records. their signatures, and the name and signatures of the witnesses. And a lot of times those witnesses were likely family members or close friends. They weren't random strangers that they pulled off the street to come witness the marriage. And then finally, the burials, you get the name of the deceased, the death date, the cause of death, the occupation of the father if it's a child, and when buried. This is an example of the database. So here, when I search, I like to, when I'm trying to find all of the kids, I will leave the first name blank. I will type in the surname. And then if Nesbitt, I did not figure that would be too common in India. If it was a more common name like Brown, then I would want to include a range of birth year or names of parents. But I was able to pull up all 5 siblings of John Nesbitt, or sorry, all 5 children of John Nesbitt. And looking at this, I can see that they were all baptized in the same place, in the same presidency, with the same father, and the birth and baptism years all are consecutive to be siblings. And then I looked up the burials, and I was sad to see that 2 of the children died as babies. So here I've listed all of the baptisms, and then I can see the burials. And so comparing them back and forth, I was able to see that 2 of the kids died. I'm not showing the original records, but you get the original records on these databases as well. And then this is a marriage of an Isabel Ann Nesbitt to James Robert Mackey in Bombay. And here I get the names of both their fathers, John Nesbitt and Stuart Mackey. And then again, all I have to do is click the original record, and I can see that original marriage record. So the East India records, we've had a lot of success of people coming in whose ancestors lived there, were part of that. And we've been able to find baptisms, marriages, burials, and so forth. All right, so this one we're going to spend a little bit more time on. This is the digital records on FamilySearch.org. We have a lot of War Office records included in our collection. Some of them are indexed, but most of them are not. But I'm going to kind of show you what's available and how to find those records. So these include War Office 25, which are the regimental description and succession books. War Office 42, which are officers' birth, marriage, and death records, wills, and personal papers. The War Office 67, which are the depot description books. And I'm going to go through each of these records and just kind of show you what you would find for your ancestor. The militia book. So my ancestor was in the militia. So now I can search the militia books to find his record. The artillery description books. And notice the time period. So this is in the 1700s up to the turn of the century. The artillery were the gunners, and we have specific records for people who fought specifically with the artillery. War Office 76, which are the record of officer services. Again, notice that great time period, 1700s to the 1919. War Office 97, which includes the soldier service documents, as well as the UK Chelsea pensioner records, which we mentioned earlier. And then the War Office 118, which are the Royal Hospital records for Dublin. So a lot of the Irish who were receiving their pensions. And then the Chelsea Hospital registers of admissions and out-pensioners. So a lot of great records that are available on Family Search. How I would search for them is I would go to search, and instead of clicking on records, this time I'm going to click on catalog, and I would go to the keyword search. And in that keyword search, all I have to do is type in the War Office. So I can type in War Office 25, War Office 69, War Office 76. The only one it doesn't work for is the militia. Typing in War Office 68 is not going to find anything. But I've given you in your handout another keyword to search for the militia records. And then I click search, and right up here at the top is the artillery records of service of non-commissioned officers. From 1765 to 1906, and then I can click on that. So unfortunately, these are not indexed, but you can go in and you can search these individually based off the time period and search for your ancestor. Now, I noticed down here, so there is an index here from 1815 to 1841. There's an index. I can search that film and see if I can find my ancestor if they served during that time. All right, so just a brief description of these records. This is the War Office 25. This one is indexed, so it would be great to go in and search and just type in your ancestor's name, 1772 to 1935. This is kind of an example of what the record looks like. This one also there's a variety of different records in War Office 25. This one's going to name the soldier, the height of the soldier, the age of enlistment, the description of the soldier. It's going to give the birthplace. So again, that's a key thing, is that birthplace, including the county and the parish where they were from, their occupation, the attestation information when listed, and then former service in any corps in the Foreign Service, and any promotions as well. And then that last column is going to list any casualties or deserters. So what's great about this, it's indexed. You can just type in your ancestor's name and see if you can find them in War Office 25. War Office 42 it's phenomenal if your ancestor was an officer, because it includes their birth, marriage, death certificates, baptisms, wills, statement of services, personal papers of the officers and their families. And this is kind of a variety of different records that you would find pertaining to that officer. The only hard part is that it's not yet indexed. So hopefully with computer-aided indexing and a lot of the technology of today, that in the future, these will be indexed. So you can just type in your ancestor's name and find them. In the meantime, the images are available for searching online for free. War Office 65 lists the name of the officer. It's the officers in the Army, and it lists their regiment, their date of commission, half pay or full pay. So half pay, if they were retired, then they would receive half pay, or if there was a reason why they could not serve full time, then they would receive half pay versus the full pay. This is just another example. So this is the list of the colonels, and from 1848 to 1849, and you can go through and see if your ancestors there and what regiment they fought in or they were a part of. War Office 67 are the depot description books from 1768. I love these records that go back to the 1700s. This gives you the physical descriptions of the soldiers, their birth date, their birthplace. So again, it already gives you some key information, occupation, promotions in the service. And if they were an officer, it gives you particulars to their marriage and their children. So again, this is an example of what this record looks like. Here I've got if they were on full pay or half pay. This tells me marriage information. So I have the name of his wife and where they got married, who performed it. This is the names of his children. So it lists 4 of his children, their birth dates, and where they were baptized. Here I have more information about the half pay or full pay. I can see that he was employed full-time. And then this is the statement of services. So again, a lot of great records that you can find in these depot description books. War Office 68 are the militia books. This is where I would think you would find a lot of people who were they just wanted to volunteer and serve in their local militia without having to join the British military per se and go travel all over the world. In these books, so again, my ancestor was in the local militia, but I could look and see if I could find his register of his birth, marriages, deaths, pay lists, roll and enrollment books, casualty lists, nominal rolls. This is an example of what a militia record may look like. So here I've got the corps, the name of the soldier, the physical description, where they were born, so the birthplace, the regiment, the date and place of enlistment, and other information regarding that soldier. So again, it just, I would think that the militia records would be a great place as well. They're not yet indexed, so hopefully in the future, these records can also be indexed. This is another record of a militia record, names of men who became non-effective in the regiment, and so forth. War Office 69 are specifically to the artillery, 1765 to 1906. There you get the soldier's name, age, physical description, their birth date, birthplace, their trade occupation, dates of service, and promotions. So a lot of rich information in these records. And the reason why a lot of people have not been able to find their ancestors is because they're not yet indexed. So again, but these images are available that you can go in, you can search them, you can see if they have a microfilm of the index. This particular one will also include the dates of marriage, dates of discharge and death, registers of marriages, of baptisms, registers of deceased soldiers. So if your ancestor fought in the artillery or was part of the artillery, this would be the go-to record source. And then any pensions or transfers. I get the enlistment date. This is the regiment rank, period of service, amount of service. discharge information, his age, birth information, including the town, the parish, the county, the occupation, physical information, any services abroad. This gives me any medals that he earned or any distinguishing marks. Marriage information. So here again, he was single. And then discharge info or pensions awarded, and possibly a death information as well. So a lot of great records, and they would have specific records to the Calvary as well, but we don't have those specific records at Family Search. And then War Office 76 is specifically for record of officer services, birth date, birthplace, marriage, spouse information, children information. That's going to be the key information that you pull out of these records of officer services. These are kind of cool records. I like the way that they're organized. Again, qualifications. It tells me how tall my ancestor was. It gives the height, the birthday and place. This particular one did not give, so it gives a space for date and place of birth, but it did not specifically name his birthplace. And sometimes you may get that even though there's a box for it, they might not put the birthplace in. This is his marriage. So again, I get who he married, when he married. If he had any children, it would give me their names, dates of birth, and baptized. When they were baptized, this gives me their periods of employment, their war service history, and then I can get any medals or decorations that the soldier may have earned. War Office 97, we talked about this earlier they're part of the British service records, which is the UK Chelsea pensioner records from 1760 to 1913. These are indexed both on Family Search and Find My Past. But in addition, on Family Search, they also include soldier service documents from 1760 to 1872. And those give the age of the soldier, the birthplace, the trade, the occupation, record of service, any decorations, and a reason for discharge to pension. And those are all searchable on FamilySearch.org. This is another example of what the record looks like. War Office 118, these are, if your ancestor was Irish, then this would be a great database to search. The Royal Hospital of Kilmainham in Dublin is where they were receiving their pension. So for Irish, you would get their regiment, their age, their rank, their service, dates of admission, some date of death, cause of discharge, rate of pension, physical description, casualties, and so forth. This is kind of an example of some of the records that you may find. Here I get the soldier's name, when they were discharged, information about their service, their age, their physical description, rate of pension, and any casualties. So here I can see at the very top, there's a couple of them that had some casualties that were recorded specifically for them. And then the last one is the War Office 120. These are the regimental registers of admissions of out pensioners for Royal Hospital. So in Chelsea, there were a lot of ways to receive a pension. You could receive a pension if you were discharged to pension, if you were sick and you had to stay in the hospital and receive your pension that way, or if you had to, if you were an out pensioner and had to go to the hospital to receive your pension. There were many different ways and many different record sets regarding pensions. This one, again, you get the physical description, the age, place of birth, particulars to their service, reason for discharge, rate of pension, and trade and occupation. The main thing that I wanted to highlight, showing all these records, is that there are a myriad of British military records out there that you can search and see if you can find information about your family. And a lot of them, most of them, will give you the place of birth and the name of the regiment. And again, so this is the War Office 120, very similar to the War Office 118, where you get their admission date, name of the soldier, age, information about their service, any complaints. This is the key information of where they were born, and then their trade and their occupation. All right. The seventh one is the World War I and World War II. I don't go into a lot of details on these records, mainly because most of these records, they're indexed, they're easily findable on a variety of different websites. And so mainly FamilySearch.org, Find My Past, Ancestry.com, Fold3, and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission site. Even though these sites on Find My Past, Ancestry, and Fold 3 are subscription sites, you can get access to them at your local family search center and search for your World War I and World War II military ancestors. On Find My Past, I can just click on search. I go to all record sets, and all I have to do is type in the First World War, and down below I get a lot of the British Army records for World War I. I like to go and I like to look at the largest databases, and so I see one for over 6.5 million records for the First World War campaign medals. I see also 1.3 million records for the First World War soldiers' medical records, and so forth. I can do the same thing for World War II, and I change it to Second World War. So you've got to play with the keywords. You could also try to type in World War II and see if you pull up additional records. And then once I get to, I type in Second World War, again, I like to look for the ones that are the largest database where I would likely have the most success finding my ancestor. So on Ancestry.com, I go to search, card catalog, and then the keyword search, I can type in UK World War I, and it gives me a lot of World War I records for the United Kingdom. Again, they've got 9 million World War I pension ledgers and index cards, 6 million service medal and awards rolls, 3.2 million service records. So again, just so many records that are available for World War I, World War II on these websites. And then for World War II, I just changed the keyword to UK, World War II. And I can try typing in other keywords to see if I pull up additional military records. All right. On FamilySearch.org, I would go to search records and under find a collection. So again, I'm showing you this over and over again because it's the same steps. To find any of the British military records on these websites, you just follow the exact same steps. And I can type in United Kingdom, and then here I get down below, United Kingdom, World War I. We have over 4.3 million service records on FamilySearch.org. Fold 3, I always associated this site with U.S. military records, but actually it's becoming a fantastic resource for British military as well. Here you can see the different categories for the Revolutionary War, Napoleonic War, and then down in the lower right corner, I've got World War I and World War II. So it's not just records for the United States, it's also for the United Kingdom. And the title actually on this screen is our records specifically for the United Kingdom. So here I can, when I click on World War I or World War II, I can either click on See All and click on a specific record, or I can just type in the name of my ancestor and hit search, and it will search all the records that they have for World War I and World War II. This site has been around for a long time. This is a fantastic site. And you can see up here at the top, it says it's the Find War Dead records of the 1.7 million Commonwealth men and women that we commemorate. So soldiers who died all over the world during World War I, World War II would be found on the Commonwealth War Grave site. Here, so they say find a grave from World War I, World War II, find the war dead in Europe, in England, all over the world. Civilian war dead register. It's a fantastic site. It's free. I typed in Nesbitt, a lot of Nesbitts who died overseas. I thought this was interesting. A lot of them died during the First World War in France. There's one who died here on March 9th for Frank Nesbitt, 1917 in Iraq. So again, it traces them all over the world and wants to be a site that commemorates those who died. But it also gives me the name of their regiment, which is pretty cool. And then the last two, this one is the National Archives is kind of the go-to source. They have resources and study guides to help you find a lot of information about your ancestor who served in the British military. They are also the archive for any original British military records. So unfortunately, they just switched their website. And so they had this little red, when I prepared this PowerPoint, this little red menu button at the top that you could click on, which I have in your handout. That has since changed. but they do have a little search box, and most of the stuff that I present here, you can just type in the search box and find it. So up here where it says search our website, you can type in digital microfilm, and it will take you to where you can find these free digital records. So this is some of the free stuff that you can get. The soldiers and militiamen discharged due to disability. So something happened, they were disabled, and then they were discharged. So over 200 years worth. Soldiers awarded pensions for length of service, almost 100 years worth there. So again, we had the artillery. The National Archives has the cavalry from 1799 to 1920. Soldiers discharged from the army in Ireland from 1783 to 1822, and much, much more. These are free digital microfilm that you can access on their site. So here, originally I said, go to the little red button. I can just type in the search digital microfilm. So here I've got online collections, and then here is the free online digital microfilm. As I scroll down, you can see the specific database for the household cavalry soldiers, service records, but just a lot. And this presentation only covers the British Army. You can do everything that I've discussed today. You can actually follow the same steps for the Merchant Marines, for the Royal Navy, the Air Ministry. It's the same steps that you can go in and find records specific to those military units. But you do have to have an account with the National Archives. And so it is free to register, but you will have to register with them. And then once you're registered and you're signed in, then you can get access to the free digital microfilm. I just wanted to show you here, so they have War Office 42, 65, and 76, which Family Search also has, but they have a whole lot more that we don't. And so it's great to go in and scroll through and see what they have, which they've made available free online. All right, so the last one is, let's say you've gone in and you have exhausted all of these resources that we just covered today. There is still hope, but that hope is at the National Archives in England. What's interesting is on their website, they say there remains a significant number of British Army records for soldiers that cannot be viewed online. And so you still have hope, even though that hope is over in England. They do, however, they can go in, so these records that are not digitized, they can be copied and ordered and sent to you from the National Archives. I was reading on their site, I think it's like $11 US dollars just to open up an inquiry. And then it's going to be more money in order for them to find the record that you need and to copy it and to send it to you. But there still is a possibility, if you can't afford to go over there, then you can still, for a fee, ask them to help send the record to you or copy the record for you. And in many of those records, though, you will need to know the soldier's regiment. So maybe you can find the regiment from the records online in order to get these records at the National Archives. So some of the records that are not digitized include pension records, which is amazing because we've talked a lot about these pension records that are digitized and online. There are still many more that are not digitized and are only available at the National Archives. The muster rolls and pay lists, which are great records where you can actually documents their military service through time. Records of discharge and soldiers who died in the service. These are some of the records that are only available at the National Archives that are not digitized. Pension records, they include the Royal Hospitals for British Army pensioners, the in and out pensioners, soldiers discharged to pension in British colonies. Those are only available at the National Archives. For the muster books, these include enlistment dates, movements, discharge dates. Beyond 1867, though, the muster rolls will give the birthplace, their trade, date of discharge or death, as well as marriage rolls with information regarding their spouse and their children. So not just for officers, also for British soldiers if they mustered after 1867. And then lastly, the records of discharge. So this is soldiers who purchased their discharge, soldiers who discharged at their own request, and other factors relating to discharges. So again, those records would only be available at the National Archives. And so that is the go-to place for any military record in its original form or form that has not been digitized. It would be at the National Archives. All right, so in closing, just to recap, we've covered a lot of information. The essential information is on your handout that you can go in that teaches you the different websites, the specific information on where to search. And then these are the 9 strategies that we covered. 1 is the British Army Service Records, and 2, the British Armed Forces and Overseas Birth, Marriages, and Deaths. Both these databases are free online on Family Search, Find My Past, and Find My Past at a local center, and they have over 8 million records. The UK campaign medals for any ancestors who earned a medal, those would be on ancestry.com. For the British Army muster books, we do have 5 years worth from 1812 to 1817 that are on ancestry.com. Any records for the British East India Company. We've gone over a lot of the different War Office records that are free online on FamilySearch.org. The online databases covering World War I and World War II. The free digital microfilm available from the National Archives if you have registered for a free account and you're signed in. And then records that are only available at the National Archives in England. So I hope today that you have learned what records to begin searching for your British Army records, the websites and how to find them online. And then the key today is for you to go and search for your British Army ancestor today. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Wonderful presentation. If you can post your questions in the chat, I've tried to answer a few of them as we've gone along.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we do that, just a heads up that our next class, that's English language anyway, we'll be using the Family Search Wiki taught on Thursday at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, same time as this one started. You can also view the upcoming webinars on the Family Search Library classes and webinars page. We would love to get your feedback as well, and so I've posted a link to a survey in the chat there. I wanted to post one other link. We have online consultations available for those of us where you can consult with those of us who work in the library and others who are qualified and ask various research questions. These are typically 20-minute sessions. I'm posting that link so you can sign up, and this can help for those of you who have some questions specific to your research in a particular ancestor. We can help you with that. So I just sent that link, and let's look through the chat to see if anything else is popping up. While I'm scrolling, let me add that so you might see across, there's the Fold3 website is known as Fold3 in the United States. In England, it is Bill just starting to ask the question I was going to answer. But good question, Bill. So there is no difference between Fold3 and Forces War Records. Forces War Records is what it is called in the United Kingdom. And Ancestry, so they're effectively the same website, just 2 different names, and Ancestry owns it, so you can get a discount. But that's a good question, Bill. I thought that one would come up, so I appreciate that.
And this is recorded and will stay on Facebook, correct? For those who missed the first part of it.
Yeah, good question, Donna. So it will be on Facebook live. If you go to the Family Search Library page, then you can see the recording. They stay up there for a period of time. That's the answer we give. I can't tell you. This is me giving you my idea, but I believe it can be somewhere in the 3-month range. I would be surprised if it's shorter than that. So, but please don't entirely hold me to it. Tanner's kind enough to post the link to the recording so you can see from the beginning there. All right. Do we have any other questions? Okay, and Tanner is asking if anyone needs a platform other than YouTube. Oh, so he's posted it on YouTube. Yeah. So, and yeah, Francie, you got it. So it's on YouTube as well. Well, I'll say again, Raymond, that was a great job. A lot of information there. It's a huge topic, and
It is, and it's not
and
an easy one. So
not in 1 hour. You could do a 1 hour class on several of the individual record sets that you were describing there.
So I hope in the handout that you can, step by step, that you can go in, you can rewatch the recording. And it's interestingly, even my ancestor who died at the Battle of New Orleans, it's still, I still have not been able to find the service records that I want to find for him. So it does take time. It takes a lot of searching and a lot of patience. So.
Okay. Well, I think we'll sign off for now from Salt Lake City. And thanks to all of you for participating with us. And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.